not a million, 125 billion. So they're just robbing us blind. The central area of the robbery is the Pentagon. It's not
Just
about keeping us
when we
safe.
say this money is gone, is this like they can't account for it, or is this like there are certain projects that maybe an Office of Inspector General can't have insight to without clearance, so we don't know? Because you're making it
No,
sound like the money is just like what they're pocketing
gone.
it or what?
They can't account for it. They
Well, there
literally
is a
say,
difference, though, Cenk, between spent on stuff we don't know versus we can't account for it. Those are two different things, admittedly. And I don't know if we have visibility into, is the money gone or are they not able to account for the program spending?
I can't believe I'm having this conversation with two people on the left.
What is going on, guys? In this video right here, the woke idiots Destiny and David Pakman get into a very heated discussion with Cenk Uygur, who is on the David Pakman Show, and it seems like it's a 2-on-1 fight with the liberals fighting the liberals in this video, or I guess you could call it the corporate Democrats fighting the progressive Democrats, something like that. Either way, you gotta love the left eating their own. And Cenk Uygur here, not that I agree with this guy normally, but he does call out these woke idiots Destiny and David Pakman on their work BS in this video. Let's check it out and make sure to leave your comments below.
If you want to if you want to actually pass any policy or do anything, you have to have an actual realistic understanding of what it is Americans even think before you even begin to go down the path of how do we implement it. And the reality is single payer healthcare. When you ask somebody, do you think the government should provide health insurance for people, that polls incredibly well.
Yes.
When you ask should the government be the second question, there were all three of these were listed in I wish I could remember the name of the polling firm, but this is around when
I
Bernie
think
was
it's the
running.
Kaiser Family Foundation that
it might be that. There's a second way of asking it that's more neutral of like, do you think that the government should be do you think that the government should be able to offer insurance or something for all levels? Something like that. But then the third question is, should the government be the sole provider of insurance and ban private insurance? And that one is incredibly unpopular. I think that's
well,
the one
the
that pulls
ban
at,
private insurance, it's like even countries that have universal systems, they don't ban, most of them don't ban private insurance. So I don't even know why that would be included necessarily.
Because that's what Bernie's plan was. Bernie's plan for healthcare was the furthest left plan of any country that would have ever existed on the face of the earth. There is no other plan.
Not true, and B, you really sound like a Republican.
That's great,
like
but I
Mitch
actually
McConnell
read the
right
policy, okay? So Bernie Sanders' plan included things like no copay for drugs and covered things like vision and dental and provided for a single means of both insurance and I believe delivery medicine throughout the entire country. It was more left than any other medical plan on the planet. I do agree with what you're saying, Pakman, that there are multi-payer systems. I'm a big fan of either a public option or even a single payer system, depending on how you administer it. I think it's fine. Medicare expansion, all things are fine. But you have to be honest about like, where is the electorate at? How do they feel about these things? And you can't just constantly blame donors and billionaires and even like this huge cope of calling Trump a fake populist. Trump is as populist as they come. He is one man against the system who's telling you that he's going to fight and take it all down as one person against all the corrupt donors and everything else. This is as populist as they possibly come. Populists become dictators. This is what populism is. It's the precursor to things like fascism or authoritarian regimes. You always get these like strong, great men.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. Do things that are unpopular.
I mean, he's winning elections on it, so yeah. And then
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you ruined my train of thought. Go ahead.
Sorry.
The last thing I wanted to ask
Pakman
about,
ruined my train of thought.
The last thing I wanted to ask about involves sort of both of you on Twitter. Cenk, you kind of went mega viral for responding to Elon Musk and saying, hey, put me in charge of slashing that Pentagon budget. Elon actually replied. He asked for suggestions. Don Jr. replied something like, this is being considered, or it was considered. Destiny, you responded to the entire thing by saying sigh, S-I-G-H. I think my first question to you, Cenk, is, do you think they genuinely want to cut defense spending, or this entire Department of Grifty Edgelords thing is just really about cutting social programs at the end of the day? Or do you really think the Pentagon is something they would cut?
So let's look at this conversation, right? So first of all, why do I call Trump a fake populist? Because he goes rah-rah average man, which I think is smart political strategy, because he's focusing on things that are popular. That's what populism is. Wow, that's rocket science to figure that out, is to the correct electoral strategy. But then when he gets in office, what's his number one priority? Corporate tax cuts and delivering for his donors like Miriam Adelson. He put in Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Mike Waltz, Mike Huckabee, all Team Miriam, neocon war hawks. So what happened? I thought you were anti-war. And part of what I'm doing here is some of the right-wing populists actually do agree with us on some issues. So, for example, anti-corruption. When I point out that Miriam Adelson gave Trump $137 million, and then he gave her four appointees, people even on the right wing go, "Yeah, that sucks," and that we don't agree with Trump there, and that's a stunning turn of events. I've never seen that happen before, but it's actually genuinely happening online, and you should give them some credit for that. Now, on cutting, what I'm asking is, do you guys really mean it? And so, if you really mean it, most of the corruption is in the Pentagon. So that's where all the pork goes, because if you question that pork, they go, "You're endangering our national security. You're putting all of our lives on the line, etc." So they stuff it full of pork. So I said, "Look, guys, if you're going to do cuts, let's start at the Pentagon. I can cut $400 billion overnight for you." And what it's doing is putting them to the test. Do you really mean it or don't you? And so a couple of surprising things happen from there. First of all, if you look at my comment section, right-wing populists actually do mean it. So this is going to be really, really interesting. So then Elon and Don Jr. say, yeah, we mean it too. And they follow through on at least one of the proposals that I mentioned, which was, hey, a lot of these contracts go to these defense contractors because the generals, after they retire, go to work for those defense contractors, and that gives them an incentive to sell us out and to buy all these bloated programs because they're literally going to get paid by those same companies. And if they say, yes, you're right, which is where they are today, and we should stop that, so that conflict of interest, well, that's a left-wing position that we've been arguing for 20 years. I'll take it. That's fantastic. And that's the unity that mainstream media pretended that they were in favor of, but only when they were doing corporate deals for tax cuts for the rich, etc. Now we have some potential actual unity. At the same time, I'm not a sucker. I've been in this game a long time. So is it possible that they don't cut the Pentagon and instead they cut social spending? Of course, that's more likely, right? But at least the very first conversation we're having online about what to cut is the Pentagon.
Can't believe I'm actually saying this, but is Cenk Uygur actually the voice of reason in this conversation with David Pakman and Destiny? As we're gonna see, Destiny, he's so against the idea of cutting absolutely anything from the budget. I mean, anytime you mention any type of budget cuts, our deficit is only like $2 trillion a year, and we have some ridiculous number, $35 trillion of debt. I mean, it's absolutely insane how much money we're spending. And anytime you bring up maybe looking into what we're spending this money on and try to find some sort of way to save some money, Destiny just completely loses his mind and turns into a woke kid on caffeine yapping up a storm and just really has no idea what he's talking about. We're going to see a lot more of that later in this clip, as well as when he tries to push back on the idea of budget cuts. I can't believe I'm saying it, but is Cenk Uygur actually having some decent ideas here? And it turns out Elon Musk, with his Doge department, is looking into many different agencies and programs and whatnot, investigating fraud even in the Pentagon. It's amazing how often the Pentagon, I'm pretty sure they haven't passed an audit in a while. A very large portion of their budget is missing sometimes, which I find very bizarre. I'll let you guys debate in the comments or leave your thoughts below and what that actually means and where the money's going on. But man, this conversation is incredible to watch. So let's dive right back in.
Perfect. You can't ask for anything better from the left-wing populist way of looking at it.
So Destiny, tell us about the reason for the sigh. Is it that you think Cenk's being naive, that they're not really going to cut, or that he's barking up the wrong tree here?
I don't think they plan on cutting. I don't even like the conversation. I feel like so many issues I have with this. When progressives and really with anybody talks about taxes or anybody talks about budgets, like the conversation, people always talk about like taxes, like they're either this like tool of punishment or self-flagellation, or it's like this noble way of. I think that we should figure out what are the government programs that we want to fund and why. Okay. So do we want single payer healthcare? Do we want expansion of Medicare? Do we want to do SNAP and WIC and benefits programs? Do we want to have tax subsidies for electric cars and solar? Like, we figure these things out. Once we figure that out, we have our liabilities. Okay. This is how much we owe. And then we need to figure out, how do we raise the money for it? Okay. Do we tax people? Do we tariff? Do we whatever? Like, how does the government fund these programs? That should be the totality of the conversation about taxes. These arbitrary obsessions with like, we got to slash the Pentagon by X dollars. We have to slash the military. Like, why? What do we, what do you want to cut? Like, let's talk about that. Do we like, was the F-35 program a mistake? Do we want to have, like no military presence around the world? Do we shut down all of our bases? Do we want to have no more funding towards any type of participation? Like, what do we actually want to cut? Because the random thing, like imagine, and it's so crazy to me too, especially because like Cenk is a business owner and all these other guys are business owners. You walk in, you ask, okay, I come into your business and you want to cut things. Like, is it just, I'm going to cut 40% of my budget. Did you just fire randomly like 40% of your employees? Or like, no, well, you look at departments maybe that aren't making money. You look at parts of your business maybe you don't need, but it's never just like randomly like, okay, we're going to cut half our thing today, unless you've got like a loan that's being called in and you have to pay up or something. So I mean, like that's one part of it. The second part of it is, it's okay. So to be fully transparent, I'm unhinged now when it comes to dealing with conservatives, because I'm more concerned about turning out base than ever appealing to these insane people. There is no principled foundation to what conservatives believe regarding anything having to do with foreign policy or the military. The exact same people who will say there were no wars under Trump will ignore the fact that he hid how much more we were drone striking people in Yemen. People will say there were no more wars under Trump, and they'll ignore the fact that we allowed, the allies that we had in Syria to die. We'll say no more wars under Trump. We'll ignore the fact that Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, that the United States bombed a Syrian airport, that Assad was chemically gassing his people still, that border riots were raging on in the Gaza Strip. Like, it's just, it's ridiculous. So for the first time ever, Russian troops were engaging with Ukrainian troops directly in the Donbass, I think in 2018. This idea that like Trump has some allegiance to some foreign policy position where it's like, oh, we're going to cut military spending is absolutely not true.
Well, even more so
yeah.
then. I mean, if that's true and they'll consider cutting something because Cenk's bringing it up, isn't that a reason for him to be involved rather than saying, this is a waste of time? I don't know.
I mean, I just hope that people are aware of what I just need people to be aware of like what's going on. Like if you get like oh well, they managed to cut $50 million from the military budget and that money was like all earmarked for the VA or something, like that's not a good thing. Right? Like we want we want something. I wish that people just spoke in policies more rather than like we need to tax billionaires because we hate them, or like we need to give tax cuts to billionaires because they save us, or we need to do that. It's like what are the policies that we want to support? What do we want to cut from the military? What do we like? That's I think the more important conversations.
Cenk?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, unfortunately, this is proving at least part of MAGA's point here, which is Destiny is now defending the Pentagon against cuts. Like, that's the neocons. And then we brought in the neocons, the Liz Cheneys and the Dick Cheneys. I don't
Wait,
want
should
to
we
be that
abolish our
party.
entire military?
No, of course not. I'm going to tell you what to do in a second. But this idea of like, don't touch the Pentagon.
Wait, I never said don't touch the
bring-
Pentagon. I just said name what you want to get rid of. I didn't say don't
Okay.
touch it. I just said
So,
name the
but
policy.
you're happy to are you happy to have the conversation about cutting the Pentagon first?
If you have a thing you want to cut from it, then yeah, sure.
Okay. So like, you're not like, even as a general thing, you're like, well, I'm not sure about cutting the Pentagon. That's amazing to me. So why did I pick the Pentagon? Well, first of all, I would much rather have that than cutting social programs. But more importantly, that's where all the waste is. And that's not theoretical or hypothetical. It's real. They just failed their 7th audit in a row just yesterday. And in the last audit that they failed, they said we can't find $400 billion. Well, if you can't find it, then you're not going to miss it. So that's why I say $400 billion. In 2015, they buried a report that said they had done $125 billion in wasteful spending and didn't know where it went. Not a million, 125 billion. So they're just robbing us blind. The central area of the robbery is the Pentagon. It's not
Just
about
when we
keeping
say
us
when we
safe.
say this money is gone, is this like they can't account for it, or is this like there are certain projects that maybe an Office of Inspector General can't have insight to without clearance, so we don't know? Because you're making
No.
it sound like the money is just like what they're pocketing
Gone.
it, or what?
They can't account for it. They
Well,
literally
there is a
say,
difference, though, Cenk, between spent on stuff we don't know versus we can't account for it. Those are two different things, admittedly. And I don't know if we have visibility into, is the money gone or are they not able to account for the program spending?
I can't believe I'm having this conversation with two people on the left.
No,
theoretically.
Cenk, to be clear, I'm with you on cutting. I'm with you 1,000% on cutting Pentagon. I even would tell you specific things I would cut. My only gripe is I don't know from what I've seen that when they say unaccounted for, it means spent on mystery stuff. I don't know that that's accurate. But
Is David Pakman playing dumb here? Can someone let me know if David Pakman is intentionally playing dumb in this conversation, or does he actually not understand what unaccounted for means? So when the U.S. government allocates money for something, most of it, or a large portion of it, to my understanding of the spending, is not funded via taxes. It's funded via borrowing money from the Federal Reserve. So typically we push a button, creating money out of nothing, and that is lent to the U.S. government at interest, and that money gets allocated to different departments, which means it's in one bank account, and then it's transferred to a different bank account that's allocated for the Pentagon, and then the Pentagon sends that money to other bank accounts when they purchase supplies, purchase weaponry, payroll, etc. So the money is transferring from bank account to bank account to bank account, which is normal and just how money moves. And so when the Pentagon can't account for the money, they're saying it went to some bank account, but we don't know where it is or where it went, or can't produce the records, which is just a really bad and pretty embarrassing thing they say. And there's different languages for this, but this is just a giant word salad at this point. But here, the purpose it had, but for some reason they can't produce the records on it. So I'll let you guys debate about that, what that actually means. I'm so sorry about that. My dogs are going crazy in the background while I'm recording. But either way, when a government agency can't tell the American taxpayers the money they spent, or where it's actually going, and it's just an awful look to have in general. Curious to hear you all's thoughts on this, and please, once again, like and subscribe. It means the world to me, and I will see you all in the next one.